What's up, Bookies.com? Jasmine McCoy here with Ryan Roberts, the NFL draft analyst at Rise and Draft. And Ryan, the NFL draft is coming up on April 28th, and this offseason has been one for the books. Tom Brady retiring, then coming out of retirement 40 days later, then some big trades happening, quarterback drama, all of it affecting NFL owners and kind of what they could do in this upcoming year's draft. So before we get into specifics, with the prospects in this draft, kind of how do you feel about the overall talent level?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in this year's draft, it's not the strongest at the top of the class, but what we have this year, Jasmine, is a lot of depth throughout. Like when you're talking about players going into like the day 3, 4 through 7 conversation, we talk about UDFAs. I feel like there is a lot of talent to be had because what we're kind of running through a little bit is couple years ago when COVID-19 really hit and players got an extra year of eligibility, a lot of players opted to take that extra year. So right now, I mean, I talked to an agent a couple weeks ago, and last year, I believe there was about 650 players that were eligible for the NFL draft. This year, it's 3 times as much. So just to kind of put into that, just kind of perspective, the quality of top may not be what it has been in some years, but the quantity and the depth throughout is certainly there.
Yeah, for sure. And the Jacksonville Jaguars, they have the number 1 pick again, and they are a team who's kind of looking to turn things around after Urban Meyer and finishing, I think, 3-14 last season. Kind of, who do you think is going number 1 overall?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Aiden Hutchinson, most likely the defensive end out of Michigan. They're in a very weird situation because usually the first overall pick is a quarterback needy team, but obviously with Trevor Lawrence in the building, they have the opportunity to pick who they perceive to be the best player available. Aiden Hutchinson's kind of been that guy that people have talked about, throughout the process as kind of a no-brainer at number 1 with the season that he had, and just checks a lot of different boxes for what Jacksonville wants to do defensively. There's been some smoke, obviously, recently. Trevon Walker from Georgia, also a defensive end. But ultimately, I think they go with Aiden Hutchinson just because there's not much conversation as far as the negatives in his game. You kind of know what you're going to get. I'm not necessarily as high as they will be, as far as the first overall pick. But I think that he's a very clean prospect, and I think that's what they're looking for.
So 8 teams with 2 first-round picks, Green Bay Packers and the Kansas City Chiefs, which happen to be 2 teams that can make that Super Bowl run. How do you see each team using their picks?
Yeah, I think Kansas City especially is in a really good spot because I think this year's class is one where you don't necessarily want those high picks because of it not being the strongest up top, but you want a lot of picks because there's a lot of depth, obviously, that we spoke about before. So the Kansas City Chiefs, I believe, have the most draft picks right now. I think they have 12 overall selections. So obviously getting rid of a player like a Tyreek Hill in a trade, that's going to be a big blow to the team. But what I think that Kansas City is going to do with that extra first-round pick now is I think they're going to try to format their roster a little differently. I don't think they're necessarily going to go out and they're going to say, I'm going to replace Tyreek Hill with another wide receiver because that's a 1-for-1. You're not going to have an upgrade in that position. But what they can do is get defensive ends, cornerbacks, some position that maybe they're not as strong at, and they can kind of make the roster better in other areas, and they can depend on Patrick Mahomes to make the offense a little better based upon the talent level that he has. So I think cornerback early on in this draft, maybe with one of those first-round picks, I think edge, defensive end, pass rusher, like you need to get, I think, really keep that defensive side of the football to play up to par because I have confidence in Pat Mahomes being able to take the next step even with lesser talent around him. Green Bay is in an interesting spot. I feel like I've been mocking a first-round wide receiver to them for like the last 6 years, and they just won't do it. But I think they're kind of forced to now with Devontae Adams being traded to the LA Raiders, Las Vegas Raiders, excuse me. So I think that they are going to go pass catcher, one of the wide receivers at the end of the first round. Maybe Jamison Williams follows to them with the injury. Maybe they're going to take a guy, like a Sky Moore, maybe as a surprise late first round pick, Christian Watson out of North Dakota State. Some guys that have had really good draft process, but I think they really need to help Aaron Rodgers here because he only has a couple years left, obviously, of his career.
And we kind of talked a little bit about that first team always picking up a quarterback. Now let's talk about those quarterbacks of the 2022 draft. And with how this offseason went, that kind of can have an effect compared to other drafts. So who are some of your favorite quarterbacks this year?
Well, my favorite overall quarterback is probably Carson Strong out of Nevada, but he is not going to be the first quarterback taken. He's probably not even going to be the first 2 or 3. His issue is that he's dealing with a degenerative knee issue that's kind of dated back since he was in high school. So he, I think, is going to be a tremendous value to somebody somewhere on day 2. But some of the first quarterbacks that are going to be taken, I think it's going to be Malik Willis as the first quarterback taken out of Liberty. He just kind of has that makeup of strong arm, really good athlete. And the floor is a little scary because I think that there is some substantial work to go, but I think that he has some dynamic traits, obviously, that you're going to bet on a little bit at the top. Desmond Ridder, to a similar degree, not quite as talented, but he's a taller quarterback at 6'3 plus. He's played a lot of football at the University of Cincinnati. I think that the NFL likes him a lot more than maybe just the media scouts or the Twitter scouts kind of do at this point. I think he's a lock for the first round. Guys like Sam Howell out of North Carolina, I think is going to be a sneaky player, maybe late first round, early second round. And then Kenny Pickett's probably the biggest riser of the quarterback crew out of the University of Pittsburgh this year. I'm not necessarily in the line of thinking that he should be a high first round pick, but I think right now with the season that he had, I think he took full advantage of the 2021 season.
Yeah, I'm a Carolina Panthers fan, so I'm hoping that we possibly could use a quarterback this draft, even though we didn't use one last year because Sam Darnold. So I'm hoping we could pick up somebody, but if not, I mean, I'm a ride or die, so I'm still be a Carolina Panthers fan. Well, are there any teams you think that are under some pressure or need to really capitalize on this year's draft for their program to exceed?
Yeah, I mean, I think teams that have coaches that are near, kind of make it or break it seasons. I mean, you just mentioned the Carolina Panthers. I think Matt Rule and his staff are under a lot of fire, and they're in a weird situation too, Jasmine, because I don't think that they're in a great situation where like, hey, rookie quarterback's going to kind of change the outlook. They need to win now, right? So I think if they're really truly a staff that is trying to win right now to save their jobs, getting maybe a different position and just trying to see what you have with a Sam Darnold or whatever other quarterback is on the roster and just try to, manufacture a few wins is a team that really kind of sticks out to me. And I think the Jacksonville Jaguars are another one right at top because they're a fascinating team. Like I said, the new coaching staff under Doug Peterson comes into this regime already with this franchise quarterback in place. He's got the first overall pick in what I think is not a great year to have the first overall pick. So picking that player, I think, or maneuvering in this draft is going to be big time for them because they have a lot of roster holes. There's no doubt about it. And I don't think this is going to be the easiest draft for a team to move back. But I think that, you can make the argument that like Trevor Lawrence is going to go to his second year of his contract. You have that roster control for 4 to 5 years, which is awesome for a rookie quarterback. But you need to really manufacture this roster a little quicker and turn this thing around because there's too many holes on that team right now.
For sure. And my last question for you is there any guys that you think that are getting slept on or that, is projected to go late round, but you think they could be bumped up?
Yeah, not as much late round, but my favorite player probably in this class is Sean Ryan out of UCLA, the offensive tackle. He's projected probably somewhere on day 2. I've seen him even into some like 4th round mock drafts. And I really think that he's a top 30 player in this draft, to be honest with you. He's 6'5", 320, former shot putter in high school, 64-plus foot shot putter. He's got great flexibility, great core strength. There's going to be some debates whether he's a tackle or he's a guard at the next level. And my response to that is it doesn't really matter because I think he's just a starting caliber player early on in his career because he's got shorter arms, but I think his athleticism kind of makes up for that. He went to the combine at 320 pounds, had a 33.5-inch vertical. So obviously, athletically speaking, he's a very impressive football player. And then another guy I think is Leo Chenal, kind of the same thing out of Wisconsin, linebacker. He's being projected somewhere day 2, even into the 4th round. I've seen a bunch of 3-round mock drafts where he's not even a part of it. And I think, again, he's a top 20, 25 player in this class. 250-pound linebacker, 4.53 in the 40-yard dash, 40-inch vertical, very impressive athlete. I think people have this misconception about him that he's just this run-stopping linebacker who's not a great athlete. He's both. Just the fact of the matter is Wisconsin used him more as a blitzer than in pass coverage because he's one of the best blitzers in the draft as well. I mean, he had like 8 sacks and 18 tackles for loss in only 11 games. So I think the upside is tremendous with both players. I think they're being slept on. I would be willing to take them somewhere in the first round conversation, but I think that some team might get a value somewhere on day 2 and maybe even in day 3 in some instances.
Perfect. Well, Ryan Roberts, thank you so much.